Hi everyone, I think we're going to start now. Thank you all for coming. This is a beautiful crowd. I'm really excited to present the penultimate homeschool talk of 2018 by Mandy Harris-Williams. It's called #BrownUpYourFeed. An image says 1,000 words and reifies hundreds of concepts. An image indicates tens of race, gender, and interactive structures and how it is conceived, created, distributed, and attended to. This talk and workshop asks us to examine why we follow what we do, and more importantly, how it is serving us. Many of us use Instagram with automaticity, not acknowledging that the images we are feeding ourselves work against our self-esteem and value systems. Please do not get off your phone during this talk. We will need it to assess how our social media, reflects our values. We'll use the platform to create an internal critique and propose alternatives. How can we design our followed media to sustain and augment our self-esteem and those who share our experience? So Mandy Harris-Williams is a theorist, multimedia conceptual artist, writer, educator, and internet community academic. She's from New York and currently lives in Los Angeles. In a nutshell, her work seeks to get everybody the love that they deserve. She graduated from Harvard, having studied the history of the African diaspora, as well as the mass incarceration crisis and other contemporary Black issues. She received her MA in urban education and worked as a classroom teacher for 7 years. She integrates a holistic didactic style into her current creative practice, and her creative work has been presented at Paula Cooper Gallery, Naval Gallery, Knockdown Center, and Women's Center for Creative Work, to name a few. She has contributed writing work to Days Magazine, Mel Magazine, For Harriet, and The Griot, and is a frequent radio and podcast guest. Follow her at Ideal Black Female on Instagram. Thank you so much, Mandy. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you so much, Manuel, for that warm introduction. And thank you all for coming. I've never been to Portland, so I am a little bit disoriented, but it's really nice to have lots of friendly Black people in the audience, and that is homifying. And I mean, regardless of African descent, I'm glad we're all here. So thank you, everyone.
Especially.
Yeah, I mean, especially, yeah, it's for y'all. I do this for y'all. I also, before I start, want to go on record thanking Yale Union for putting me up. I'm in a real luxurious little apartment on the premises, and there's a speaker in there, and I was listening to my R&B jams and feeling really just, giving a lot of energy to this space. I was so happy that I was able to kind of settle here before doing the work, so thank you to Yale Union. And thanks all of you for coming. Most of y'all I don't know personally, some of y'all I know from the internet. So thank you for trusting that this was worth your time. And I'm gonna do everything I can to follow up on that expectation. So this is my hashtag I've created, #BrownUpYourFeed. The experience of Brown Up Your Feed is yet to be fully determined. Technically and specifically what I mean by that is that there are not that many posts or users on the hashtag. So I'm really excited for moments like this that are, I would like to make this collaborative so that we can, as a group, figure out what it might mean to create an anti-racist attempt against a media company that operates under white supremacy. It's gonna be tough, but I think we can make some progress. So I do like to, at the beginning of this presentation, give a little autobiography of how I kind of came to this moment in my internet usage. So I will sit down and I will present that. Okay, so who am I? This is also like what I ask, like when I go to a party. I'm so rude. I'm like, who are you? Where are you from? Where are you going? So I'm gonna give you guys that right now. So when I was 12, I moved from the Upper West Side of Manhattan to Harlem. Have y'all ever been to New York by a show of nods? So y'all know that's like a brown up your lifestyle kind of move. And and I was living on 123rd Street and Fifth Avenue, which is just like 2 blocks from 125th Street, several blocks from the Apollo Theater. So it felt very much like, oh yeah, like I'm in the center of like Black America, and I had never experienced anything like that before. And yeah, now it's a little different. There's like a Whole Foods on 125th Street, which is really, really sorely under-resourced. But at least they have the marquee, I guess. There was 2 times before when I went, there was a Dapper Dan for Gucci billboard, which was like so wild. I don't know if y'all know much about Dapper Dan. Dapper Dan is the gentleman who like did all these like elaborate logo suits and looks for primarily like hip hop artists in the like late 80s or like 80s and early 90s, and then was sued by like all of these luxury companies whose logos he was using and like making way cooler stuff than they were. But now he's been kind of absorbed back into that system by being contracted for Gucci, which is like, I mean, he seems happy, and he's currently like the mayor of Harlem. So I'm happy for him, but you know, it's an interesting turn of events. But anyways, back to my autobiography. I attended this progressive elementary school on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, just a few blocks away from Columbia. So every day I would like start in Harlem and then go hang out. I mean, I lived with Black people, and I would go to school with white kids, and having to go back and forth and kind of divide how I was moving through the world was really interesting. For example, when I was about like 12 and my body started to change, I would like walk through my school, and like I remember being teased specifically about like my lordosis, so like the curve in my spine, and I guess like all these kids, well, all these young white boys kind of thought I was like trying to stick out my butt. That was not the case. I just, you know, am like West African descended, and I have lordosis, which is, you know, spine curvature in my spine, my lower spine. But when I would go back to 125th Street, like literally the moment I would like break from the threshold of the underground to the overground, it was immediate attention, and it was very strange to have those 2 kind of things back to back. So like previously invisibility, and then like a complete, you know, a communication to me being teased about the non-comprehension of like my physical body, and like the non-acceptability of my physical body, and like the accusation that I'm doing something to sexualize my own body, when in fact it's like my literal spine. That was like always an interesting kind of bifurcated social scenario that I would have to go in and out of day by day. At around this time, George Bush got elected, which was also weird, because especially in a place like Manhattan, which is such like this neoliberal beacon, people really were pushing the idea that like this was just going to be it. Like now we're all progressive, and I don't say that with like full confidence in what it means to even be progressive, but like I think that was kind of the narrative for at least my own coming of age period, was like the Clintons, and then it's going to be Al Gore, it's obvious, and I was really disappointed by that election. And like very recently before that, maybe a year or 2 before that, we had in New York City, we had the murder of Amadou Diallo. So these are kind of like the impressions of what I'm starting to see as I'm coming of age. I'm starting to see my body being received very differently. I'm starting to see what conservatism in this nation looks like, what the right really looks like. I'm starting to see the right emerge. And I'm also seeing that even in a so-called progressive landscape like Manhattan, that there are these moments of police and state violence that go without justice or excuse. Not that there ever could be justice or an excuse for that sort of interaction and loss of life. So as I was getting all of this influx, there was also this other thing happening, which was DSL. So the internet was starting to move faster, and I was starting to use it as a tool and a weapon and a self-retreat, a mask and a window into the world, from the world, a mode of interacting. And with each new version of AOL and each new speed of modem, I was becoming more aware of and participant in the world beyond my immediate surroundings. So I was learning to shape my identity in classrooms and chat rooms, and learning that it was mutable as well. I think, like so many people who are my age, in my age cohort, I should say, lots of the things that I learned about or felt that I couldn't explore within my immediate surroundings, I felt that I could explore on the internet. And there were different rules of performance. So I'm kind of learning okay, Harlem is one world, Upper West Side is one world, the internet can be like a totally different world. It felt like power when I initially came to that awareness. And the internet felt powerful for a very, very long time as far as my communication of my identity, or at least an exploration of my identity, or at least some sort of participation in community, or attempt at building community, until I got an Instagram. And then I was really confused about why the internet was working as it did. I was compelled by the format. You can write more than on Twitter. You have access to what seems to be like a bigger network than on Facebook. But frequently I would go on there and I would be sad, if not triggered to spiral deeper into anxiety and depression. I noticed that there were endless suggestions that became a curriculum of sorts. If you follow this person, then you'll probably like this person, then you'll probably like this person, starting with women who I selected to reflect me. So the first time I noticed that there was something really wrong with what was happening with my Instagram experience was I tried to use it to encourage, inspire, and see myself in media, specifically regards to my hair and my hair type. And that came with a lot of complications. One of the primary complications is that I learned this very intense gradation system, which I'm sure some of us in the audience know about, this 4A, 4B, 4C thing, which was just those sorts of systems have a way of describing and also categorizing such that they do not liberate. And I feel like with the natural hair movement, or something about the algorithms, or something about my behavior maybe, led me to go from people who looked like me to people who looked maybe a little lighter than me, and then it kind of just, until I got to a 3C type, which would be a loose curl on a far fairer person than I. And so I realized that there was something wrong with perhaps how I used the app. I'm willing to own my own internalized white supremacist actions, but I also believe that there is an invisible hand that is leading us to follow and encourage and attend to fairer-skinned folks on Instagram. So I joined in 2013, and here's where I'm going to start showing you visuals. But first, before we get fully into the presentation, I want you guys to activate because I want it to be collaborative. So here is a Selfie Esteem questionnaire, and y'all can participate in a couple of ways. One of the ways you can participate is to answer these questions for yourself, which I'll read aloud in just a moment. You can also go on your Instagram to the hashtag #BrownUpYourFeed tag, and what you will notice, assuming I haven't been re-shadow banned. What a delight. Okay, so there are 3 slides which have some questions for introspection, responsible digital citizenry, and self-care. They are essentially the same questions that are up here on this slide, and maybe we'll take about like 5 to 10 minutes depending on how I see you are engaged, either thinking, talking with a partner, or answering in the comments of these slides, and you can take either one. And I'll go ahead and read them out loud now. So this questionnaire asks, how much do I use social media? Time, effort, and direction would be considered, right? So like how much time, obviously, but how much effort am I putting into social media? And also, what is the directionality of that effort? How do I represent myself on the web and why? What are my favorite accounts and what do I like about them? What is the production value of the photos in my feed? How do the algorithms determine what I see? And obviously it's proprietary information, but if you'd like to make an estimation about how the algorithms push you in one way or the other way, I'd be really curious to see how y'all experience those. And am I getting my needs met online? So let's go ahead and we'll stop in 5 to 10 minutes. I'm gonna watch these posts, and also if anybody like just wants to chat, I'll leave my post here at the didactic helm gladly. Just let me know. Just be like, hey, I have an idea. And y'all can chat, because that's the idea. It's gonna turn into talking. And also even just because you would search like curly bob, probably. No, I haven't looked at at least So, oh, y'all, so if you go to top, it won't be the 3 slides in sections, but if you go to recent, I've just thank you for clarifying. I already bought it stuff. I already oh, there's she was like, thank you for reading. So all kind of really hard for me. Sometimes it's one of my favorite words. The algorithm show me like I don't. Okay. Thank you. When I clicked on one skincare video, they just started showing me like constant skincare videos. I keep clicking on links and like, oh, I think like it's like
Yeah.
it'll be like it'll show me like dumb stuff like on my face. Okay, so I think we'll take about like 1 more minute and then we'll come back as a group. I used to teach. Sometimes I'd be really going in on details.
I love it. Yeah, super perceptive. And speculative.
Right. All right. If y'all are making comments, let's try to send those in. Did anybody make a comment on the posts? Oh, I love it. Okay. May I read? Does anyone object to my reading their comment aloud? Too bad, because I own it now. No, real talk, Instagram owns everything we just said, but okay, let's see. I'm just going to read down this comment. So these are all responses to the questions for introspection, responsible digital citizenry. I'm unsure I know what my online needs are anymore, or if I ever did. Wow, starting really deep. I feel like I'm required to meet the needs of the internet more than anything else. I'm addicted to social media. I check it when I wake up, I check it when I take a shit, I check it right before I shut my eyes for rest. It takes up too much of my time, and I wish I could use more of that time drawing, writing, or sleeping. I even use social media during a movie. I choose to be lazy with effort, and other days I feel inspiration. It depends on how badly I was treated in society that day. My direction depends on my experiences in public. I love to complain on social media because the ones who are closest to me no longer want to hear it. So therefore, I choose social media as my outlet for the public to judge me. It's true. Mostly I use social media to look at art, but it's nice also sometimes to just see the faces of people that I haven't seen in a while. And I use social media all day. Yeah, I'm a social media addict.
Is that a comment or is it?
No, that's sorry. This is me talking now. I'm a social media addict, yeah. It looks like there's, ooh, cool. Okay, there's more coming. I exist on the web in many different Instagrams. Wow. Primarily 2 separate accounts, one for pictures of my face and friends, and one for aesthetic BS and friends who don't need to see my face. Thank you to everyone who contributed online. I would love to open it up to folks who didn't make comments but have opinions or feelings about these questions or ones they saw on the feed.
I feel like I'm more of a lurker. I feel like I have no problem talking aloud. Like in this instance, I feel more comfortable saying what I want to say here in this room than like to write it down, where it'll just be there forever. I think there's something about the like permanence of putting things on the internet and like there being a record of it that like kind of freaks me out a little bit. And so I guess that just means that I consume and digest way more than I like give back, which I feel guilty sometimes. I feel like I should be like contributing more to the internet. And then I also get like sometimes people give me flack of like, oh my god, you're a lurker. Like you don't comment or anything. And I'm like, I comment in my head. I just never write it down. I'm also bad at texting, so maybe that's also part of it. I mean, except for the people I know. This one's like, comment on my stuff. Well, not to you, because I'm close. Anyway.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. And if y'all ever like, I do not have preciousness about keeping the mic. So if you want to contribute at any time, please just indicate that by I won't say a raised hand because that's so old school. It's like or you can get creative about getting the attention. So let's go back to a brief history of Instagram. So in 2010, Instagram was born. I always do feel like this really messed up connectedness to the birth of social media. I'll say because I went to Harvard summer school when I was a kid. I was like really about it. I was trying to do it. And I had this TA who was in a blocking group. So that's like a large group of people that you live with at school. Who was in a blocking group with Mark Zuckerberg and was like, some guy in my blocking group just started this thing. And we were like, cool, that's awesome. I think it's a great idea. It's changed the world as we know it. So I feel this like crap allegiance to it in a way that it's like an evil that I feel is proximate and somewhat well known. And then throughout my own matriculation, there were folks who were major capital investors in like the very early days of Instagram. So it always felt kind of like the media conglomerate in the backyard, But so it was in 2010 that Instagram was born. And it when Instagram was born, it was on iOS only. There were 10 million users in the first year. Something that I find obviously pretty interesting structurally about that is that it's expensive to have iPhones. So obviously to have it only on iOS and not have it roll out to Android for 2 years is an advantage for a lot of people to learn and set up kind of a society of iPhone users who are able to use this app adroitly. In 2012, right after they opened it up to Android, they changed the terms of service policy, adding the following sentence. To help us deliver interesting paid or sponsored content or promotions, you agree that a business or other entity may pay us to display your username, likeness, photos, along with any associated metadata and or actions you take in connection with paid or sponsored content or promotions without any compensation to you, which basically means that Instagram owns everything you post and they can make money off of it, which, you know, in my opinion, gives them a vested interest to do so many things, which I will elucidate throughout this, presentation. But it also gets into this trap idea of authentic advertising, which has become like the birth of the influencer movement, right? So like it's not you know, Brad Pitt who's selling us something. It's just like a regular person just like us who uses Instagram just like us, and we're just as likely and welcome to become participants in that influencer culture. So authenticity becomes a bit of a concern. So as users were growing, so were advertisers and obviously usership. The last counts of Instagram users totaled ultimately 800 million as of September 2017. And of those 800 million, talk about addiction, 500 million daily users. So most people who have an Instagram go on it every day. And that was about, that was like a year ago, right? Yeah, it's October 2018. The last count that I researched was, it was up about 100 million in April. So assuming that same rate of growth, there's likely about 1 billion Instagram users at this point, if not more. And what's really interesting about this to me is that in 2016, Business Insider reported that Instagram had 500 million monthly users in 2016. So what that means is that it is becoming more addicting, or we're becoming more addicted to it. There's more advertising, as we've seen these changes, we've also seen changes in the terms and services and how the app itself operates as we interact with it. So in 2016, we also had this like big shakeup of the Non Chronological Timeline, which is the point where people really started to notice like, oh, there's a certain thing being put in front of me at certain times, and it is being ordered in a way that I'm not entirely certain of. And not certain if I'm comfortable with it, and not certain if I'm being seen per the way that I used to be seen on this app. And then in 2017, there were unofficial changes. There are changes so frequently to the algorithm now that is mostly user reported. So Instagram doesn't just come out and say like, hey guys, the app is gonna act a little differently. You're gonna notice different engagement, or you're gonna notice that different things are coming up on your feed more. It just kind of happens. And because I follow a lot of people who see themselves as interacting on Instagram, but not necessarily being I'll say media privileged, that's pretty much the only way that I'll find out that there's been like an algorithm change, is just by user reporting on the app itself, and just like a clarion cry of like, okay, I'm noticing that nobody's liking my stuff anymore, which also psychologically is like a real smack, right? Because I mean, business-wise, I'm personally somebody who promotes their craft on Instagram, so like it's my money. I'm not pleased about, you know, my marketing efforts ever being curtailed, but then also, you know, I do have that rush when I get likes, and so when that stops or when that changes, it certainly makes me like pause and question like, Is it not hitting? Did I not look cute? Is my lazy eye showing? So, it's really interesting how these algorithms mess with our self-esteem. And there's not a ton of clarity around that. Let's go to the next slide. So I've started to analyze some of the problems or the pitfalls that we can see if we just look at a really simple history of Instagram, that which they make public, and there is so much that they do not make public because their algorithms are proprietary, right? So if I knew their algorithm, the idea is, then I might be able to create an app that's just as appealing and addicting as Instagram is. So they're not ever going to be forthcoming. I will say this right now, though, because I believe it. And I know the feds are watching. That if cigarette smokers, at a certain point in time, if there was a movement to require transparency about what is included in a addictive product such as cigarettes, I see no reason why, like let's say it's for worker productivity. I see no reason why we as a people cannot demand or start to make a movement such that we can understand what the ingredients algorithm are to this addictive substance. Problems with Instagram include perception of authenticity. We're made to believe that it is user content, it is like by the people media, which, I mean, authenticity is a really problematic term as is, but I think it's difficult at this point with as much advertising presence as there is to claim that like all of the most successful Instagram media is just authentic. Advertising obviously introduces a new element, censorship. Ooh, okay, so censorship is not applied equally across the platform. In 2013, there was a big shakeup around censorship when Petra Collins posted a photo. Petra Collins is a white photographer. She's quite live, and I would say like not somebody who I'm surprised to see in the media. In that, I guess her visage is media-centric, white woman's like beauty standard. And in 2013, she posted a picture where like a smidge of pubic hair was out, and she got her account taken down. And ever since then, there's been this kind of public dialogue about who's being censored and for what. That dialogue has been taken up in white feminism. It has not, I don't think that it has been addressed for bodies that are not white women with the same intensity. And when I say I don't think, I mean, it has not. One of the things I saw like that was interesting to me was there's this black model. She's descended of West Africa, and by that I mean slaveable. So I mean like she looks like somebody who here in our United States of America might have worked in the field, and I find that to be an extremely important concept when we're thinking about who is featured in popular media. So a slaveable black model posted a photo on her Instagram. It was essentially the same pose as a photo that Kim Kardashian posted maybe like 2 weeks later. Hers was yanked, and then Kim can do whatever she wants. Not per my rules, but per Instagram, per Instagrams. Then she like made this side-to-side comparison, and it's like both of them, sitting with like a thong on and like looking over their shoulder. But like, what about a slaveable woman makes that so explicit or so in defiance of Instagram's terms and conditions that it becomes something that once it's reported is yanked, as opposed to when Kim Kardashian does it? That's a leading question. I want to talk also about algorithmic justice. And here I want to give credit to Sophia Noble, who is a scholar working out of USC, working on algorithms and how algorithms are inherently anti-Black, at least in the iterations which we see them, which are born of white men who are CEOs who get venture capitalists who are white men in a white supremacist context. Professor Noble did a book, it's called Algorithms of Oppression. In that book, she broadens a study wherein she simply typed Black girls into the search of Google, and the result was, when she first did it, was like porn. So she initially did this because she had I think it was her niece was over at her house, and she was like, what do 12-year-olds like to do? Like, let's go online and search Black girls. And it was stuff that I'm sure she did not want to show her niece. It also just goes to show how our bodies move in internet space, that we are, the most popular search hits are porn. Obviously, we've talked about this idea of transparency and propriety. So we may never know what the algorithm does or how it operates, and even if we were to know, we might not ever understand. I mean, there are some of the most promising programmers who are being yanked to work at these corporations, these media corporations or internet corporations, and they don't want their secret out because that's like their product. So there's obviously IP concerns, but there's also public health concerns. We spoke about this digital divide, the digital divide of, do I have a smartphone? What is the pixelation of my smartphone? Did I start getting followers in 2010 when I had an iPhone because I could afford an iPhone, or did I have to wait until they updated to Android? And this also being said, Instagram is not fully forthcoming about this, but many of the people who we consider like Instagram celebrities are people who were featured very early on in the Instagram era. And when I say featured, what I mean is there used to be not just an explore page, but a featured page. So it's like Instagram chooses the people who they think are worthy of attention and puts them on a featured page. I don't even remember this. I know this because somebody who was featured told me, shout out to my sources, but it was kind of like this very formal thing where you were vetted by the Instagram developers, and not the developers, I suppose that's not the right technological term, but the culture community, and then you were elevated to the status of a featured user. And I know from that source that, in a matter of 3 days, you might have gone up 30,000 followers, right? So when we think about, especially like, I'll just speak from personal experience. When I was before I knew that information, when I would look at somebody's follower account, I would say, wow, this person is quite popular. Maybe I'll follow and see what's going on, see what everybody else thinks. It's like this, reifying element to their online presence. But once I realized that the feature aspect was happening, I was like, Okay, I see how you zhuzhed up a lot of that influence, which is not to say that these folks didn't have incredible platforms or weren't sharing stuff that was entertaining or worthwhile, but it is to say that it is not of the people. It is not fully democratic. Language is a really big barrier. All of the new features for Instagram, and I'll say this as of last April, but as of last April, all of the new features for Instagram were rolled out in English-speaking countries first. So, stories, you know how you get like this, you know, that ring, it's like Instagram has something to tell you. That happens for everybody who's an English language learner before everyone else who uses Instagram. Or sorry, an English language speaker before everyone else who uses Instagram. So if you speak English, you're getting this kind of jump start on getting good at certain features. I'm gonna go ahead and just make a conjecture, a hypothesis. If I had a platform and I was trying to make certain aspects of the platform cool, I would positively reinforce those who used the new features, right? So I've been thinking about like IGTV, right? And so like I don't really know anybody who likes to use IGTV, but like, so how that would work in my mind, and this is just a guess, but it's a guess of someone who pays a lot of attention. My guess would be that folks who posted things to IGTV would get a boost in the algorithm and come up more, such that would then reflect back on Instagram, and I would see like, oh, this person with 100,000 followers is now posting on IGTV. Now IGTV must be cool, right? So that's my little guess on features. So obviously, being able to afford an iPhone, afford any sort of phone that has a camera and has the capability to host Instagram, and then language, these are like major digital divides that give people quite a good deal of privilege in the Instagram world. Yeah.
And what about like people that can afford to buy followers too?
Yeah, I mean that goes.
There's a lot of people just like buying Instagram followers.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. And I think they've tried to make like some sort of like stop gaps against that, but I don't think they work. Yeah. Yeah. There was supposed to be this thing, I remember somewhere around 2016, where they were like, oh, tomorrow we're gonna bust everybody who bought their followers. Y'all remember that? I was ready. I don't know if they ever followed through. I'm so messy, I was like. Yeah, so obviously all of these things like language specifically, being able to afford certain phones, fall under the heading of white supremacy. And this is without even getting to the point of like how we perceive bodies, right? Like this is all like level 1 structure. This is before me and Kim Kardashian like go toe to toe and see how many likes we can get. Like, and then of course there's this issue of addiction, which is very, very serious. To that end, I'd like to show a little video. It's really simple actually, but I'll let it speak for itself.
We are all addicts, all hooked on a natural chemical produced in our brains. We get a fix, experts say, when someone likes our Instagram picture or the retweet notification pops up. It all goes back to something called dopamine. which is found in lizard brains, and in every animal all the way up to Homo sapiens, although humans do have higher levels because we eat more meat and fish. This drug dispenser is pre-built into our bodies, what one clinical psychologist calls the Kim Kardashian of brain chemicals.
It's like a part of my job, the Instagram.
It's the reward and pleasure drug. Dopamine is linked to love, lust, sex. It's involved with things like motivation, attention, movement, addiction. It plays a role in just about everything that happens in your life and brain. Too much dopamine can result in addiction to whatever behavior triggered the increase. Here's how it works. Technically, dopamine is a neurotransmitter. It's a messenger carrying information from one neuron to the next. That could be, oh my God, I just saw chocolate cake. I love this cake, and more would be even better. Physiologically speaking, dopamine could be a toxin or elixir. For instance, secretions in the prefrontal cortex improve your working memory, but it's delicate. Too much or too little can damage memory. It allows you to focus and pay attention. Too little can trigger ADHD, even Parkinson's. Drugs like cocaine and amphetamines allow extra dopamine to remain in your brain longer than normal, resulting in heightened feelings of pleasure and more of the drug. It not only rewards us, but it also makes us anticipate that future pleasure, like that first frosty bite of the second piece of cake. Big tech is well aware of how this works. It's the pleasure pain repeat cycle. The author of The Hacking of the American Mind, who's a medical professor, writes, technology, quote, is not a drug, but it might as well be. It works the same way. It has the same results. He points out, tech can cause stress in the brain, which can in turn lead to addiction. Here's how that works. The stress shuts down the prefrontal cortex, the executive part of the brain, which normally limits dopamine and our sense of pleasure or reward. When the brain gets used to a higher level of dopamine, it wants us to keep seeking out that addictive substance or habit for more. This is called the dopamine loop, and it has real-life effects. Post something on Facebook, and chances are your friend's going to begin to like it or comment almost immediately. Send a text. Getting a quick response can be a short burst of ecstasy. Dopamine starts that seeking behavior in each example here. Then you get rewarded, which makes you seek even more. Do it again and again and again. It's hard to stop. Chances are, you've checked your email, or at least thought about it in the past few minutes. Or Twitter, or both. That's not technology knocking. It's your brain. It'd like some dopamine. Now.
Little news features like that get me really anxious, so I'm gonna give you guys a minute to process. And if anybody wants to share feelings, reflections, experience about this cycle of addiction, I invite you to.
I'm just thinking about how when I go to bed, I have the phone in my hand and I feel the phone overheating, and it feels like it's gonna blow up and I feel so sick and grossed out, but just swiping and staring, and sometimes I go back in and out, trying to find something new, but there's not anything new, and it kind of does feel like, I think I understand, relate the two, addiction to, in general, just having to seek more and more, and not getting enough of a feed, and not being fed enough.
Yeah.
And it feels really like I'm getting sick from just pulling the phone.
Yeah.
Or device in general.
I definitely have had moments of physical sickness. I think I'm better able to identify them now because it freaks me out.
Yeah.
And so now when I feel like that, I feel dizzy actually sometimes, and I think it's partly the motion aspect of it. But I think the most physical response I have is when I'm in bed at some one end of sleep, and then probably undernourished, dehydrated,
Yes.
maybe hungover, and the scrolling is making me dizzy, but I can't stop.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. In May 2017, a survey conducted by the United Kingdom's Royal Society for Public Health, featuring just 1,500 people aged 14 to 24, asked them to rate social media platforms depending on anxiety, depression, loneliness, bullying, and body image. They concluded that Instagram was the worst social media for young mental health. And in response, Instagram stated that keeping Instagram a safe and supportive place for young people was a top priority. One of the things that they've rolled out recently on iOS 12 and above is the timer. So when I can finally afford that phone, I'll be able to keep myself more mentally healthy, apparently. Let's talk about the foundational concepts of brown up your feed. So here's what I'm trying to do. I love Instagram. Don't get me wrong. I've been like shit talking Instagram for about an hour, but I really love Instagram. I was a classroom teacher before I was a internet community academic. And only by using this app proficiently have I been able to change my career. Now, I won't say only, because I will find a way when I want to. But this, the app has enabled me to build community. I know some of y'all from Instagram, so like, that's great. I have also found out about events and communities that I want to be a part of. I've learned about all sorts of places and artists and things because of Instagram. And so I truly believe that social media can be benevolent and can be used for good. There was another view, full screen. Oh, and don't show speaker notes. They're a little embarrassing. Okay, let's see. View. Don't show speaker notes.
Go to view present. That's the full screen.
Oh my God, we did it, finally. But I feel like with Google, like you can never see this bar. I don't know where that bar came from, but yes! Okay. This is about to be so official right now. Okay. Professor Williams. Play. Okay, so I'll just start to speak about them and then they'll show up. So the first foundational concept of brown up your feed is to pursue a more democratized access, and also, access in many ways, right? So what is the way that we can all participate regardless of how much money we have to spend on our phones? What are ways that the app can, in some ways, fill the gap between my 6 and the 10s that are on the market now, right? So like, I will not have as good of a camera. How can Instagram, through their app, make my photos look better? How does Instagram work on Android? How does Instagram work on all sorts of phones that are being used all across the globe such that we can have an equal experience? Will it, I guess, is the more important question, because I believe that technology is really powerful and they probably could if they wanted to. Meritocracy. I think part of like the enormous appeal of Instagram, and something that makes a lot of us attracted to it, maybe not us in this room, but of the 1 million some odd users, I believe that we're attracted to the concept or the vibe of meritocracy, which is this idea that like if I just post sexy enough, well-styled enough, well-lit enough pictures, I too can have a reality show and not have to make work. Which verdict's still out as far as I'm concerned, but it might not really be like that meritocratic, right? There might be things that are in my way such that I'm not getting the same exposure. I don't know because, again, there's no transparency on how the algorithm works. This concept of choice is another one that I find compelling and like worthwhile as we think about how we might restructure an internet that is more ethical or social media that is more ethical. So as I talk to y'all about like this, this hair type, I'm gonna kill it. As I discussed with y'all, like I thought I had a choice in, I thought I had a choice in like what I was following, but I didn't have as much of a choice as I was being led to choose certain things. One of the things I think that we underestimate that's really, really powerful is like whenever you follow somebody, you have a drop-down menu with a horizontal scroll of a bunch of people you should follow. Where does that come from? Yeah. And like your explore page, like I had this moment on my explore page where I could not stop seeing white women doing hip hop dancing. And I was livid because like, okay, no offense, anyone can dance hip hop. It's just, I don't want to like only see in my explore feed bodies that do not look like mine, first of all, doing the art practices that are traditionally derivative of the experience of slavery, as I see it. A long arc of history, but you know, like that's how I see the culture of hip hop, and so it is offensive to me when the people being featured for that culture are not the people who inherit the drawbacks of carrying the bodies that created that culture. So a lot of what I see as foundational to making a better, more ethical internet is explicitly anti-racist and explicitly pro-Black femme. Black women contribute massive influence to social media. But we reap a very small share of the dividends. And this transaction is the exact contour of white supremacy as it has functioned in this nation and globally, in our unseen labor, in our structural inability to utilize our own cultural genius, in lowered barriers to intercultural access, we are left underprotected and overused, and this is something I see as a common experience for many people who do not fit a white, cis, heteronormative, media privileged physicality. I believe that technology can be benevolent though. So here I just have like a little photo of some protesters from Arab Spring. And I'm really not good at history, so I'm not going to try to be, but a large part of communication was facilitated by Twitter during that movement, and that's something that, first of all, I don't know if we could ever repeat it, but it happened. And so Brown Up Your Feed grounds a generation of ethical, anti-racist, intersectional social media users in a challenging conversation about values, images, and personal performance. So this is my response to my depressive, dizzying episodes. when I think about activating Brown Up Your Feed, I'm thinking about how it works on multiple fronts. One, I believe that seeing Black bodies, Indigenous bodies, creates, in different ways, creates empathy. I was just recently, I might have been last night, I've been thinking about how this concept of the super predator is built into so many people by something that is almost very similar to how we use the feed, where it's like flash images, like 5 o'clock news, an African-American man, 5'10", right? And they show that like illustration, and then they unflash and then they go to the scene or whatever. But we are always getting this really quick, like physical information of like West African criminality, like multiple times in a newscast, right? So like, how are these split-second judgments and exposures matched with concepts allowing us to consider certain people in certain ways? And can we become more empathetic if we see different sorts of behaviors being carried out by those people? So one of the I just follow this hashtag Black Men Smile. It's a super simple principle, right? Like if you expose yourself to enough Black men smiling, you will not support a system wherein we can be murdered for selling Lucy's, right? So that exposure perhaps is something that we can be intentional about, and maybe, just maybe, it can lead to justice. When I think about how this leads to real things happening, obviously I could talk about like 4chan and internet communities around Donald Trump, but I hate him and I don't want to include too much about him. So I'll talk about Barack Obama, who is also very problematic, but a lesser of two evils in the system that we have now. And one of the ways that his campaign was able to win despite him being a Black man was by utilizing the internet and utilizing this like sunshiny, smiley, hashtag Black Men Smile, right, in our Facebook feeds. Perhaps we can make media that is not just progressive, but even like abolitionist. Perhaps, I don't know. That's why this is collaborative. So here's how I brown up my feed. I'm looking very specifically to follow people who are West African descended women. Here, there are 3 examples of accounts that I like. I don't follow the Slumflower, but I like their account. But Amy Saul is like this incredible intellectual and I think maybe a postgrad or now a professor in New York. But I just love this image because she looks bad as hell. And she's also like talking about human rights and talking about like this really deep kind of discussion about like how her work connects to what she does when she goes out in the world, and like she wears great outfits. Like to me, that's like perfect media. The one next to that is Diamond Stingley, who is a fantastic artist based out of New York, and this is a text piece that was displayed in the Stern windows at NYU. And I really like, something I really like about this post is that it's textual. It's like text-based contemporary media. And I think that we don't always have to have like this really typical sort of picture, right? Like we can put like informational slides into our feeds. We can put, media coverage into our feeds, or we can put text into our feeds. So I really like these examples of ways that just show how I'm like kind of really intentionally trying to diversify the things that I'm seeing. I eventually unfollowed the sunflower because I could not participate in a movement that was about breasts. And then there's also like the creator element of like, what am I sharing that is my feed that I'm browning up. So there's a couple of things here. One of them is, this is a flyer for an event that I did, because I promote myself, because I believe in myself, and there should be Black women on social media just believing in themselves and, talking about their speaking engagements that are gonna happen. I wrote this Black identity extremist thing because I thought that was such a laugh. But it's a real thing. But I like to be, what is that thing called? Where you like to be challenging? Contrarian. Yeah. I also put a link to my PayPal because I deserve to be paid for my work. I put this post by Bad Dominicana, who I think is just such an excellent account and gives me so much comfort. And I'm going to talk about that in the following slide of why I really need her in my online community. And then lastly is Lashane. Do you guys know this supermodel, burgeoning supermodel? She recently has like been featured on a Universal Standard advertisement. It's like a huge, I think it's like billboards and like really big wheat paste presentations of her in like some briefs and like a, I can't recall if it's a bra and panty or a tank top, but she is a large woman who is like very, very outspoken about how her body is not well received on the internet, the things that people say to her, the idea of like plus size model, critiquing the idea of plus size models, which as we know is like a term for models with wide hips and big breasts is what is really meant by plus size models. And she's really like blown the lid off of that while she is serving face and has created an entire space for herself. And I'm hugely inspired by her. As far as the content of what my feed is, I like to utilize memes in so much as they are kind of like this common language. It's like a flashcard, right, for a concept flashcards. And then I like to write short essays. A lot of people told me when I said I wanted to be a writer, oh, like you should build your Twitter following. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm not good at saying things in 150 characters. I'm not that great at saying it in 250 characters either. Over the last hour, you may have noticed I'm a bit verbose. And so I really like that you can actually, it's kind of like a picture book, right? Like you have this image and the image can be packed with concepts itself, and then you can immediately kind of deal with that image and the concepts that you've brought up. And then this is actually a meme I made myself. It's not fully original in that there is a me and the white women men chose over me meme already. but I just did one with Serena Williams, and actually I'm so happy. I forgot this person's name, but they're like tennis foes, but real life friends, and it's Caroline Wozniak something, and this is her friend doing a little joke about Serena on the tennis court, which triggered me because I told y'all about that story about my lordosis in 7th grade. So I was pissed to see that. And then this one is, oh my God, I've really brainwashed myself. I'm so happy. I'm forgetting names. This one is Anna Kournikova. But these are like all these women who like have these massive watch deals or like modeling contracts wherein they're supposed to be ideal athletic bodies, despite the fact that they are nowhere near the athletic caliber of Serena Williams, but because they fit a physical ideal, were like then brainwashed to believe that they are also incredible athletes too, which, I mean, they are. These are all world-class tennis players, but they're not Serena. Did you have a comment? Okay. So yeah, I just criticized that. And then I want to ask y'all about ways to brown up your feet, but first I do want to talk about like what I mean when I say brown up your feet, because brown has a lot of different connotations. When I was on the East Coast, I had heard brown used to refer to South Asian people. On the West Coast, I have heard brown used to identify Latinx people. And I do want more than just African descended inclusion when I say brown up your feet. Personally, what I mean is like folks who don't get shown or considered to be, or considered to be worthwhile of our attention. It becomes really, really difficult, specifically. Let me back that up and speak personally. Something I have noticed that hurts me when I see it is Black appropriation in the Latinx influencer community, which to me seems to be like I would estimate that maybe it happens because like in places like, well, I'm from New York, so the folks that I grew up with, Latinx folks who I grew up with were primarily Dominican or Puerto Rican. So when you say brown up your feet in those communities, it's a very different thing than when you say brown up your feet to somebody who is descendant from Mexico, Central America, South America even, or Spain, right? Because now people be appropriated and they don't care how big the stretch is. So I think that there might be something to like what we mean when we say people of color and how that becomes sometimes too inviting, and who is the creator or like the historical pathway of something like cornrows, baggy pants, you know, it gets really detailed. Baby hairs, right? Baby hairs is like an example of something that's like, it's kind of a little hard to pin down, or like, you know, braids, for instance. Like I know a box braid is definitely like, that's gotta be Harlem. Well, it's black. Box braids are black, but like then there are other braids and it's like, Like, you took maybe a black style and kind of roughed it up. Is that now, so it's a little bit difficult to tell. This is why I really appreciate Bad Dominicana, who is a black Latina, and she helps me identify the things that are bothering me and making me feel used. So yes, I do want it to be inclusive, but it's like one of these things where it's like always having to ask, always having to test. Like, am I prioritizing Latinx people who are slicking down their baby hairs and look phenotypically effectively when they walk down the street white? And then am I like patting myself on the back, like, yeah, I browned up my feed. Like, I have such an ethnically diverse feed. And the same goes with like Asian people, South or East Asian, that there are certainly markers that are, whether by coincidence or by surgery sometimes, or by how we are adorning ourselves, closer or further from that white media privilege norm. But it's always something that I'm like wanting to have people ask. So like, brown up your feed is not like a static in my greatest hopes. It's, it's something that will move away from me, because it's, when you make a hashtag, it's like, oh, I did that. Like, now anybody can use it. And sometimes I do look at the feed and of the hashtag, I'm like, oh, welcome to brown up your feed. But I would like for it to be more of a protocol, a questioning protocol, than a category. What do y'all think about that? Just sip my grease while y'all contemplate.
I feel like I often have the question of more, when we're talking about Latinx people, for instance, I've had like white Mexican people, or like I'm Cuban, so like white Cubans be like, I'm brown, but it's like, just because you, I feel like, yeah, with Latinx in particular, because if you speak Spanish, I feel like people automatically associate that with being brown, but like, speaking this, like, people of Spanish descent are white, like, because they're from, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I feel like there's always that, like, very weird space there.
And also, weirdly, on top of that, like, the Spain that we know was colonized by, like, dark-skinned Africans right before they came here. And, like, that's still an internal project happening within Spain of constantly trying to erase, like, that most of their infrastructure that kept them all the way up until 1492 was from Muslim Caliphate.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, their rulers were, like, they looked like dark-skinned Africans. And it's, like, it's still, like, a very hotbed issue, and that's why, like, Spain and, like, Spanish people, even among Europeans, look and are the way that they are and have, like, those stakes. Because, like, these racial projects that we're trying to talk about, like, and I have seen, like, the thing where people were like, oh, yeah, I'm definitely going to prioritize brown people. And I was like, oh, yeah, my homie over there, oh, they're white passing. Oh, they're white passing. Oh, they're white passing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no, they're actually from here. They're actually from there. They're actually from there. Oh, she's from South Africa. Well, why is she blonde?
Right.
Yeah. So I, like, definitely with brown, I definitely, like, I feel the potentiality for anti-blackness to, like, rise again, because we definitely see that, like, the term people of color so often erases the experience of, like, Afro-descended people.
Right.
And the specificity of, like, you know, what happened on that continent. So, but I think it's still important to, like, reach for.
Yeah. I like, just really quickly, I like brown because it's a verb. So I always think of, like, there always can be browning.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm Panay Mexicana, skin, definitely white passing. And I know I grew up in the Bay Area where like there were a lot more people like myself that were mixed, and you know, we always had that pride, and a lot of us are second generation where our parents, you know, didn't speak Spanish in the home, you know, for many reasons, because of racism and just assimilating to the American culture. And so for me, you know, growing up I was always told, you're brown, you know, like that was very much important. But, you know, it's definitely, I feel like it's definition is changing over time. And also I'm recognizing more of my past, my privilege, you know, because I also came from an educational background where my parents were both first generation Americans, and, you know, were educated and have particular privileges. So it's like really hard to understand, I guess, as a mixed person where I stand with it, but I definitely feel the pride. Like, you know, when I hear music, it's like my blood is like rushing.
Yeah.
You know, so for me, it's like very more like indigenous. It's like but I have to say, I don't know, it's complicated.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like I have to stand down.
Yeah. Yeah, it's complicated. I ask these questions: who do I follow? What are the rules I make for myself about who I follow? What are those rules based on, and what constitutes worthiness? And when I'm talking about like worthiness, I'm specifically concerned with this claim that is circulating around historians who are trying to define this time. We've been told it's like the information age or the information era. And then there's been this kind of dovetailing of that where it's like, if it's the information age, is it also an information economy, or perhaps it is an attention economy, right? So it's our attention that drives, you know, resources, dollars at this point, which, you know, so many of us have experienced with, or like at least I've experienced with like just trying to legitimate my own practice and feeling like, oh, well, if I have more followers, it will make more sense when I approach this, you know, group that they can, you know, make money off of me, and that we can like be in a financial agreement. I'm bringing something to the table. I'm bringing eyeballs, right? So attention is now a commodity. I think I'm almost done here. Okay. So yeah, browning up my feet is an ongoing aspiration, and I don't think I'll ever stop trying to figure out how to like darken, queer, like enlarge, fatten, like how I can continue to expose and sensitize myself to people who either one look like me or don't look like me, but are somehow outside of the media privilege, the sphere of media privilege. My ultimate goal is to build collaboration and community and engagement, all of these things here, because I find that like very stimulating. I suppose this this presentation always ends with questions, because it's very difficult to come to a conclusion about how to make it anti-racist, or how to make anti-racist efforts in media, social media, or in structures that are inherently tied and bound with white supremacy. So now that we've had this chat, I do want to present these questions again and see if there has been like any inspiration as far as how we can do this, how we can change some of the ways that we're interacting, new ways that we will follow or perhaps unfollow. Yeah, so here's some more questions for y'all. I've asked the first one. What's my favorite app and why? How do I use it and why? How do I exist on the web and how do I aspire to exist on the web? What are my favorite accounts? What do I like about them? What do I gain from them? How do they ask of or from me, right? Like, what do they want me to do when I engage with them? Can I participate in these worlds, right? So like if I'm looking at like a Kim Kardashian, I won't lie, for a half a second I was following Kourtney Kardashian this year. I think I saw a great outfit and I was into it. And I was like, well, she's the least loved Kardashian. It's justice. But I realized like participating in paying attention to her is not something that I can afford. Like, I literally cannot afford to get those inspirations. I am getting onto a roller coaster of capitalism that I'm not interested in. I do not want to participate. I've also been really curious about like this last question here. Am I naturally performative? And what digital space do I wish to take up and why? There have been a lot of claims that Instagram is for narcissists. I'll be that. I have always loved attention. As a child, I loved attention. I really liked my parents to film me on VHS and like watch myself. I've concluded that my narcissism is a political revolution and I'm not gonna change it. And I've come to a lot of peace about like exposing myself and putting a self out there and sharing a self. But I've also met folks from the internet who are not at all as outgoing as they are on their Instagram. And I have a lot of Instagram first friends. And it's like, it's always really weird when people are like, oh, you seem like your Instagram. And then I'm like, wait, what am I supposed to seem like? And then you'll also meet people who are like very introverted and are performing something completely different. And I'm so curious as to like why they feel they need to do that. Any thoughts on some of these new questions? I got slides and slides of questions too. Which elements of social media have escaped the forces of capitalism and white heteropatriarchy? That's also a leading question. Does my digital world reflect my IRL world? How do I understand the similarity or difference? Why are followers analytics divided into only 2 genders? And what are the consequences thereof? What is the production value of the photos in my feed? This is a really big one I think of. Like, rich people make better photos because they have more rich stuff to put in their photos. And I've been attenuated to think that, you know, rich stuff and glamour and media deservingness are one cohort. So I really love it when I see something like a really grainy photo that makes it to virility. I'm like, yeah, you did it. Like, you did it. And I very consistently am thinking about like, do I just like this person's photos because they are rich, or do I like their photos because they give me some sort of, you know, they communicate some sort of concept that I like. And then this last question is the spooky question. Not only how do the algorithms determine what I see, but how does knowing or not knowing keep me safe or unsafe, satisfied, and or participant? Lastly, I want to encourage you guys to unfollow some of the white people you follow. I say that because we are so used to seeing white people, and we think that's what we're supposed to see on a screen. Like, we think we're supposed to see certain things on the screen. Like, sometimes it doesn't even look better, it's just white. And so, I've displayed this template. It will be on my account. I'll leave it up there for y'all if you need some guidance on how to unfollow some of the white people in your feed. It also works for your skinny friends, your rich friends, your mainstream attractive friends. I hope you can understand that I need to unfollow you. I can understand how it would come off personally, but I want to let you know that it is not about you. I'm becoming conscious about what media I need to feed myself, and thus I'm going on somewhat of a social media diet. Let's talk IRL if you have any questions. They're not ever going to talk to you IRL. Love me. I'd like to ask what it means to y'all to work against white supremacy in social media. This is kind of what it meant for me, which is why I start with my biography, because it is a personal journey that I invite other people to take up and participate in, but also I realize that it's highly personalized. And I'm really, really excited for folks who are thinking about this, such that we can collaborate on a better space to make community across physical barriers, because it can be, depending on our intentionality and our practice and our purpose, it can be a really powerful way for us to communicate, for us to connect, and potentially even revolutionize. Any thoughts right off the top of the head? Okay. Well, oh yeah, go for it.
I commented on it online, but I think I boiled it down to creating epistemic antagonism to white aesthetic.
Yeah.
And like, in terms of like the read and like shade, specifically as like a form of like serial critique that really like wears down like whatever's being looked at, and really pointing out like the genocidal and like genocidal like, characteristics of white affect, of like what this deference or preference has done.
That sounds fun too. Thank you for sharing that. All right, yeah.
Sorry.
No.
In 2010 or 11, I had a similar, I don't know, feeling or impulse, the brown up your feet, but not nearly as like broken down and eloquent as this. But
it's not a competition.
But I feel like you articulated everything that I was feeling the moment that they were just like nebulous feelings that I didn't know how to describe. But I had this similar brown up your feet moment, but for Tumblr. Because when Tumblr first came out, it was like a very specific look, and it was all like pink and white girls and like pictures of clouds and stuff. And I was like, yes. And then I was like consuming that, but then I felt terrible. And there was at one point where I like made this declarations post on Tumblr, and like I'm only following people who like look like me, and I'm noticing that I'm feeling terrible about myself and everything in the world, and like I'm not skinny enough, boobs are too big, like blah blah blah. And then I consciously like went and unfollowed all of the white people that I was following, and then like started building more of like a tailored feed. So I think it's interesting that it's like coming around, and then again, and I continued that like that philosophy into when I started using Instagram.
Yeah. No, I remember, I remember this post that you posted, because it was, I don't know, I was like reorganizing even just like how I like looked, like my Instagrams in general. Like I was organizing like what my friends' Instagram versus like my private friends versus my public, whatever. And like also at the same time moving back to Portland and having to look at people like in Portland and be like, whoa, this is like super white, like what is happening, like what, like where is like, what is like, how can I like brown up my life feed? Like, and like, it's just like, and I remember seeing this like while I was like reorganizing and like going through and like seeing like who's looking at my posts and who's liking my stuff. Is it like just white people? Is it like Asian people? Is it brown people? Is it black people? Who's looking at me, and like who am I feeding with my body? What is going on? And I remember seeing this and being like, oh yeah, this it's really important to be like more intentional on like who you're following and who's following you, and like that, because at the same it's like who is your body for, like, and who are your eyes for? What are you looking at? And it's like, so I don't know, I really appreciated this. I remember saying it. Yeah.
I guess like thinking about how much our lives social media takes up, or just like the internet, it's kind of alarming because it's become like a dimension of like our existence, and like how so much of like supremacy is like surrounding us, and like how we like engage with it like through the media that we consume online, and like it's kind of scary like when you realize like how much of my life I've spent like looking at a screen, like liking things or swiping or whatever. And so I think it is really important, like being able to opt out, like by disengaging, because that, you know, if we can't get away from the white supremacy around us, like, and it's still like on our phones, like, you know, it's scary. So like, want to try to get away from it in ways that we can't, just like the ways that you exemplified.
Yeah, all valid strategies. All right, that concludes my presentation, and I really look forward to, I just look forward to the world that is like potentiated every single time that we connect around this topic. So thank y'all for what you've contributed in attention or thoughts or statements or questions. I really do appreciate it. It makes this so much stronger. Hopefully y'all will follow the hashtag, round up your feed, and you can follow my account if you like. It's about the movement. And yeah, just once more, thank you to my incredible hosts, Homeschool. This has been a pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.